But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the house it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Sorry I'm a bit late, there was a few things to finish up. Had a bit of a late dinner today. But I think we've got an interesting collection of crap to look at. Once I figure out where's... First of all, let's get that set up so I can see it while we're looking at videos in full screen. Sorry about that. Trying to find where is, let's see, I've got so many things that I don't use in here. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's fucking hell, I had one notification and that's why it wouldn't show. Okay, that would be a great thing if, then sometime in a new version of OBS, they would change it so that your notifications did not actually cause this particular problem, but it's a minor issue, and actually it is, on the whole, an excellent piece of software, so I'm not going to complain. I don't know if you've all seen, but Yemen, in response to Israel and the U.S. Escalating their just complete denial of basic humanitarian supplies to the Gaza Strip, in violation not only of the ceasefire but of the Fourth Geneva Convention, they have resumed their sanctions. And apparently, from what I just saw before going on, the U.S. is resuming the war against Yemen that Joe Biden pretended wasn't going on at the same time as he was bombing the place. And one thing that's worth noting here, because I remember we were looking at liberal sex pest Vush, Ian Kuczynski, defending the U.S. war against Yemen for the sanctions like months ago, and he basically balked at the idea that this was anything to do with what the U.S. and Israel were doing to the Palestinians in Gaza. And I bring that up because the reason I use the word resumed to describe the sanctions is that when the ceasefire was implemented, Yemen dropped the sanctions because they were giving a chance because the sanctions were tied to ending the siege of Gaza, and the ceasefire was also one of the things that's supposed to happen as part of the ceasefire is that the siege ends, and at the very least, specified amounts of humanitarian supplies are allowed in, which have never, Israel and the U.S. have never allowed in all of that. They've always fucked around with that. And every time that the Palestinian resistance insists on actually, actual compliance with the ceasefire deal, U.S. media will act like they're the ones who are jeopardizing the deal, as opposed to the U.S. and Israel, who are just outright violating it. So anyway, that is back on, and definitely something that should be... we should be paying attention to. Let's see. Where shall we go? I see Ethan Klein's got a video called "This Must *** King Stop," and I'm very curious about that. Because what? I mean, people completely clowning on him over the just defamatory bullshit that he's been putting up, or his pro-Israel propaganda. I want to know what must *** King stop. And I think we're going to go there first.
In my long career on YouTube, I've pretty much seen it all. I've been swatted several times with LAPD helicopters, the street shut down, police with guns drawn doing a perimeter around my house. We've also been visited by the FBI 3 times. They were all to warn us of a credible threat against our lives. One time, most recently,
I mean, citation
came at
needed,
7 a.m.
but...
and said, "Do not open any packages until you hear from me, as we have credible bomb threats against you that we found online." I thought I'd seen it all. I knew that this content nuke was going to draw a lot of negative attention.
Oh, I mean, and it has. It has, because everybody has pointed out how completely full of shit he is.
Seeing how extreme Hassan
I mean,
and
this
his
feels like he's doing a Sarah Kendzior. Yeah, he having come up with a defamatory so-called content nuke that is just full of outright lies, including lies that are meant to justify genocide, which, despite him claiming to be staunchly pro-Palestinian, he never calls by its name in the content nuke. He decides to make himself the victim by talking about these threats that he's supposedly getting. No evidence is provided of the threats, note.
Fan base are, and his orbiters. But the lengths to which they've gone to harass us and get revenge for going after their god king Hassan has frankly gone
Wow, look at the jump cuts in this.
beyond any type of point of civility and humanity, to the point where they're calling CPS, Child Protective Services, to come to our house and break up our family.
I mean, those calls are anonymous. You would not actually know who it is. He's just blaming people who criticized him for his bullshit, but he doesn't actually know that. I mean, he's also being sued by his housekeeper, who had all sorts of unflattering things to say about how his household is run. So, I mean, it seems like there might be somebody closer to home that might be doing this.
On Friday morning, an agent showed up to our house saying that they had received an anonymous tip that our children were crawling around in dog shit, eating dog shit, and contracting diseases. Not only have they called CPS on us, now they're starting to...
Okay, Ethan, mad at journalists, thinks they're all conspiring against him. Hila thinks Hassan paid PR. I almost feel bad watching this because it legitimately feels like Ethan's spiraling mentally and needs serious help, says Tote My Egg. He has a wife encouraging his paranoia, absolutely zero friends looking out for him, and shitty, neglectful parents. I don't know anything about his parents, or somebody on the crew would have it. They all sold out for a payment. What? Yeah.
Try to call in a 5150 to get me committed. It's really gone on too far, and at this point, I'm ready to take no prisoners, take the gloves off, and call out everybody who needs to be called out. The thing is, once you target my children, then a line's been crossed that cannot be walked back.
Well, notice here, like, there is no evidence. I mean, several of the people actually who said, who we just showed their comments in that wall of screenshots, said it was none of us. I mean, which may or may not be true, but the thing is, he's provided no evidence that this is how this happened. He's provided actually no evidence of any of these things.
Kids are involved, and people are targeting my children, harassing my children. There's no length that I won't go to take care of this, and I think that's something...
You know, I mean, if this is true, you do get some paperwork, usually, from CPS, if they do some sort of an inspection or something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, they are required to investigate, and you do get some kind of, you know, paperwork to say why they're there. Although one thing you don't generally get, in fact, I mean, almost, to my knowledge, is almost never get, is the identity of the person responsible. So, I mean, assuming any of this is true at all, which it may be, who knows, he's like pinning it on people who've criticized him for fucking putting out a long-ass video of genocidal propaganda and lies about Hassan in the most bizarre McCarthyite scaremongering fashion ever.
That every parent can relate to. All these people, incidentally, who are promoting this type of insanity are, in fact, childless, and will likely remain that way.
I mean, how the hell do you know that? Like, first of all, who's promoting this? Like, who is he talking about at this point? And how the hell does he know whether they have kids or not?
The CPS agent showed up and he started asking us all kinds of questions like, who feeds the kids? Who takes care of the kids? What do you do to the kids when you get angry? How do the kids sleep? Do the kids have toys? Is that what happens when you get mad, or what happens when your kids get mad?
Well, I mean, obviously he does a content nuke on his kids and accuses them of being terrorists.
Well, he walked around the house. He looked in our refrigerator. He walked all around looking for dog shit, apparently, although when he showed up immediately, he said, wow, this place is clean. Our 3- and 5-year-old boys were at school. Our 8-month-old is upstairs sleeping when he visits, and he says, I need to go upstairs and look at your infant visibly to see him and confirm he's okay. Well, he's napping in his crib. He goes upstairs to look around the house, to snoop around. He investigates Sonny.
I mean... This is literally, this is exactly what he has to do. Like, my mother was in emergency therapeutic foster care for a very long time, so I know all about these sorts of inspections and home visits because I was constantly hearing about this stuff. And what he's describing is quite normal. I mean, it sounds like somebody who's thorough in doing their job. Like...
Youngest wakes him up from his nap, and even though he woke him up during his nap, he was greeted immediately, actually, by a smile, because Sonny is probably the happiest baby in the entire world. He smiles at everybody. His name is Sonny because he is just a ray of sunshine. He just gave him a big smile. I mean, he's just the sweetest kid in the world. So we went back down...
His fucking shirt matches his microphone.
...stairs to continue the conversation, at which point he said something that both me and Hila had us both saying abso-fucking-lutely not. He said he was going to go to the children's school to interrogate them there. We both said...
Which, I mean, again, is, I mean, talking to the kids when you had a report of somebody's kids being abused is kind of how that works. If the kids are old enough to actually talk to them, you do ask and say, okay, so what's your home life like? That is, like, again, you can...
Said, you are absolutely not going to ever go to their school and talk to them. That is fucking insane. We agreed that he'll come back to our house and interview our 3- and 5-year-old children at a time when they're at home, so he doesn't need to humiliate them in front of his peers, his teachers, the staff.
I mean, and that's reasonable, and he agreed to it, which is a reasonable thing to agree to.
And, you know, needlessly stigmatize them.
Like give them astigmatism?
My young 3 and 5-year-old children, who are sweet and innocent as can be, have not yet been interrogated by a CPS agent, but that is due to happen on Wednesday. He also spoke to our nanny, our housekeeper. He's called the pediatrician that takes care of the kids. He talked to them.
I mean, the housekeeper, remember, is suing them.
Pretty much sifted through every angle of our life,
shitty work
having to do
environment
with our kids, in an extremely violating, insulting, unbelievable way. Just a complete breach of privacy and inhumanity that it's like you can't believe that you, as somebody who...
I mean, what he's describing, yeah, I mean, it's not... I can imagine it is not a pleasant experience. It's got to be an absolutely nerve-wracking experience, even if you know there's absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, I'm not gonna... I mean, that's... Like, of course. But at the same time, I mean, what he's describing is actually the, like, kid gloves version of this. Like, they said, don't do it at the school, do it at the house. And he said, yeah, okay, fine, we'll do that. Come back 2 days... Like they're getting 2 days notice. The whole point of these sorts of inspections, when there's been a complaint, is that you go in there without any chance to sort of tidy things up to make sure that everything's all right. That's like the whole point. So if anything, this guy is bending over backwards.
Has done nothing wrong, has taken care of your kids, to be subject to this forcible investigation because of some fucking freaks online called anonymously to say that our kids are crawling around in shit. The immediate...
I mean, again, he's just attributing this to, like, Hassan stands, but he has no way of knowing who it's from. It could have been from the housekeeper or the nanny. I mean, the housekeeper is clearly pissed off at them.
Question for me was, who did this, and how am I going to hold them accountable? It didn't take me long to catch the trail of the obvious suspect, which is the work of a subreddit dedicated to harassing me, my family, my coworkers.
Are we going to get to see this, Ethan?
Their families, too, frankly.
I mean, I just have to say, this guy has lied so shamelessly about so many things that it actually takes no time to check out, that I don't really believe a word that he says about anything unless he actually shows some receipts.
H3 Snark is the place that they originated. If you don't know what Snark is, it's this growing phenomenon of community...
Wait, who the hell doesn't know what Snark is? That's not a new term. Like... That's just taking the piss out of things. We were using that term in the 90s. It's this growing phenomenon of what? Taking the piss out of things?
He's dedicated essentially to destroy someone's life, picking it
That's
apart,
not what Snark is.
Them.
That is not what Snark is. Like, I mean, he's just literally making this up.
Trying to ruin their life. It's something that's become quite common on the internet. And something that Reddit, who is the main host of such activities, has completely turned a blind eye to. Take, for example, right here, H3H3_, which is the new Snark page. The top post on this page is from somebody...
Okay. I felt bad for AB until recently. Hello, River Rune. Who the hell is... Yeah, I mean... Who the hell is Abdullah Ayad?
Somebody named Bad Empanada, which we'll learn more about. It says, Bad Empanada with another banger. Quote, "You're the best parents I've ever seen," said house slave Abdullah Ayad to the Kleins after CPS visited them because their kids contracted parasites from dog feces. The Kleins frequently advocate for genocide of Arabs.
I mean, we've seen them do that. I don't know about any of the rest of the stuff, but we've seen them do that in the most backhanded and cowardly way.
Ayad sits obediently in silence. He is a tame domestic animal. This is just literally, anyone of a normal disposition can see plainly how fucking insane this is. It has 400 upvotes after...
Well, I mean, the bit about... I don't know about any of the rest of it, but the bit about, advocating for the genocide of Palestinians is checking out.
3 hours. It's a very active sub of absolutely deranged individuals. The problem is that this subreddit, this community, is being legitimized by creators.
By your behavior.
Such as Hassan, such as Denims, such as Mike from PA, and all these leftist commentators who... They haven't said anything about about this Reddit, which, or his, like, interesting redefinition of the concept of snark. Yeah, like, snark... You remember something, this was in the early 2000s, it was called, and actually late 90s too, Television Without Pity, or, and what they did was they would do these funny recaps of TV shows, and they described it as snarky. In other words, they're making fun of it. Like, especially reality shows, those were the favorite ones. I never watched reality TV, but I loved reading their recaps of reality TV because they were hilarious. But, like, snark is just making fun of shit. Who think they can get one up on me by sicking and...
By pointing out that you're completely full of shit and advocating for genocide?
And participating and legitimizing the most crazed psychopaths on the internet.
What, the IDF?
I bring this to YouTube because I respect the H3 snark, and I believe that they're being silenced. And I saw on the H3 snark that...
Remember, we have not really seen anything from any screenshots that actually validate a word that he's saying yet.
Ethan had uploaded Instagram stories about Mika's rhetoric that says...
And it's about the H3 snark subreddit. For more than a year now, Ethan has been talking about it and saying how toxic this place is, how they promote harassment, doxing, stalking, and why it should be banned.
Because I believe these snark subreddits on...
Well, I mean, and if all that's true, it should be pretty easy to provide some receipts.
Reddit should be banned. It's literally fostering the most psychopathic. It encourages harassment, doxing, stalking. It's just it.
I guess it's fine as long as it's not the Destiny subreddit.
I think it's time to hold all of them accountable. Here, for example, is Denims, aka Hassan Waiting Room, watching...
Well, you mean Denims who caught you in some really, really big fucking lies.
Bad Empanada talk about the state of our house and how we take care of our kids. Let's take a look.
He lets his dogs shit all over his mansion, and he just leaves the shit on the floor, something that is probably related to the fact that his former...
Like, I mean, again, I have a certain degree of ambivalence around Bad Empanada. I would like to know where he's getting any of this from.
Housekeeper is suing him for a number of different reasons, so I would assume
yeah, I mean, that's true. His housekeeper is suing him.
Have a housekeeper anymore, or perhaps he lost his extra housekeeper. So now the house is just like covered in dog shit, and he has kids, and his kids like crawl into the dog shit, and God forbid, I don't know what they do with it. I don't know if they eat it or if it's just from like contact with it.
Is that what's okay? Is that from the complaint that his housekeeper filed? Where's he getting this?
Their hands or something, but they contracted a parasite that I had previously never heard of in my life called Giardia.
I mean, I've heard of it.
The dog shit that is all over his house.
Dude, how is it that like maybe once a week I look into...
Okay, and now I'm just very curious because this is very specific. And it feels like he would have gotten this from something. Okay. Interesting that he's threatening. Apparently, I mean, I was just trying to find something there. to suggest where this came from, because I don't know how. I mean, fucking Bad Empanada's in Argentina last I checked, so how he would know about any of this, I have no idea, but maybe if you watch the whole stream, you would know. I don't.
What Ethan Klein's been up to, and every time I manage to find more and more terrible shit.
Oh, wait, okay. Riveroon, tell us more. Okay, he inferred this from Ethan's own previous comments on streams. Like what? And is there any place we can look and read about this, or? Yeah, I mean, BE probably is having fun with hyperbole. He is not exactly a stranger to the land of hyperbole.
This is where Ethan tells a story about his family getting Giardia.
We already have Mold Mondays. Now we have Shit Saturdays.
Also, this is not a joking matter, by the way. It can be very severe and deadly to small children. I mean, much like many other illnesses, it's very, very, very dangerous when infants get the same sicknesses that adults get.
There are other ways to get it. I mean, poor food hygiene will do it. I mean, if somebody doesn't wash their hands afterwards. If my recollection, it's been a long time since I read about it, but I believe you can get it from contaminated water as well.
There are lots of things that you can get as an adult. You're totally fine. You'll be A-okay. No problem. A child, a small infant that has no immune system.
Wait, so he told his employees... So the Giardia thing is something that Ethan himself was acknowledging? That he talked about publicly, and he said his kids got it, or is that what I'm hearing, or... Because, I mean, that sounds like that didn't come completely out of nowhere, but I don't know anything about this, and I don't trust a word that Ethan says. I take a lot of BE with a grain of salt, because it's like the quality of his output is so fucking variable.
Shouldn't be catching anything.
Now at this point, as he continues, notice the chat is almost in complete universal agreement. Call CPS. Call child endangerment. CPS, social services. Bro needs to unironically call CPS. That's child endangerment. Okay, if his kids have Giardia, they need to be taken away. Actual worst father ever, etc., etc. I'll let the chat play for you, but you can see just how crazed this community is. And once again, this is...
Wait, I mean... You can see just how crazed this community is. I mean, they're saying if the kids got this, and they got this the way that Ethan apparently suggested that they got it, that's a serious problem, and that is child endangerment. I mean, that's not actually wrong. It is a serious hygiene problem. I don't know that you would necessarily... Like, that can be a one-off thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, if that's the whole, like...
Denham's chat from the 1st, the call came on the 3rd.
No wonder his house is covered in dog shit, and his neglected children raised by nannies have contracted parasites previously unknown to science from the feces. I wonder why he skipped over all of this, because everything that he said, everything that I said in this story, which by the way was apparently compiled by his crew, playing...
No wonder this motherfucker's always sick. Yeah, it all makes sense now.
By the way, these people can't keep their...
Yeah. So, wait, this all comes back to Ethan himself? So, yeah. I mean, there are definitely other ways to get it. And if he had it, I mean, and he's saying the only way you can get it is by literally eating shit. I mean, for leaving aside that that's wrong, you can get it other ways. But it does not actually suggest... I mean, that sounds like he's saying that he himself eats shit.
Talking point straight. On one hand, it's we don't raise our kids and our house is just run by nannies and housekeepers. But on the other hand, we also keep our house so dirty that there's dog shit everywhere. I mean, what are the housekeepers and nannies doing?
Well, I mean, suing you, but other than that...
All makes sense now. It makes sense why he doesn't care about Palestinian children when he is neglecting his own. How is this happening? How is it happening? How is this happening?
I have a 10-month-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old who are in school. Of course I'm sick all the time. Once again.
Yeah, but that's not how you get Giardia. That's an unusual thing. That's an unusual thing. You wouldn't. That's not something your kid brings home from school, really. That's not it's not an airborne infection.
These childless people pretend that this is uncommon when, of course, anybody with any sense...
I mean, if he's the one who put Giardia into the room, and it seems like a weird thing to make up... Tori boleti hu. I mean, that's not something that that kids just pick up by being in school with other kids. I mean, that's flu. That's these days. That's fucking COVID, which is already, I mean, worse than any of what they're talking about. It's fucked up that we've decided to turn schools into like fucking COVID incubators. But yeah, that's not just something that you.
The thing is, these people are knowingly lying. They know that they're lying. It makes no sense what they're saying, but they do it anyway. Because, as you can see in the chat, and Denims endorses this clearly, as you can see, she's not moderating this at all. And it's pretty much 100% of the comments saying call CPS on them. Their kid should be taken away. That she believes that it's justified to break up our family.
I mean, I don't hear her saying that. Her chat has run away with the narrative. They're saying that. Her chat moves pretty fast. I don't know that that necessarily means that she agrees with every single thing that's in the chat.
This disgusting fucking human being who's endorsed by Hassan and the entire left community on Twitch, who is protected and elevated by Twitch, is on her platform right now.
He was just banned by Twitch for a couple of days for a hyperbolic comment about Rick Scott.
For our children to be forcibly removed from us by Child Protective Services. Denim is such an evil person. She is not responsible enough to have
Wait,
a platform.
okay, so if Denim is evil for having a conversation with Bad Empanada, who brings up this Giardia thing, I mean, which is, at least that's what it looks like to me. I haven't seen the whole thing. Okay. Okay. The whole family got it from... Okay, hang on a second. Let me just... Okay, the CDC, contaminated water, food, surfaces, or objects. Drink untreated water from springs, lakes, rivers, shallow wells. Close contact with someone who is sick from Giardia, especially in childcare settings. Weakened immune system. Children are more likely to get sick than adults. Yeah. Have contact with infected animals or animal environments contaminated with what the CDC calls poop. Like, what the fuck, CDC? I mean, feces is right there. Who's this written for? Yeah. Boiler filter. Avoid touching. Okay. So it spreads from close contact. There are lots of ways to get it.
She should not be allowed to broadcast videos ever again.
Okay, so if she should not be allowed to broadcast videos ever again because she had a chat with Bad Empanada about you, what do you think is an appropriate sanction for somebody who broadcasts a pack of lies intended to justify genocide, a genocide that is actually happening? What do you think should happen there? I mean, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda said life imprisonment for that. Would you agree, Ethan?
Now, you might wonder, what is it they're referring to? On the podcast, I was telling a story about we adopted a new dog about a month ago, and she was having diarrhea which ended up being a extremely common stomach parasite that causes diarrhea. It's extremely common, and it's very easy to address. In fact, Ducky, our Yorkie, when we got him as a puppy, also had Giardia, and we treated him the same way. Let's see what I said about it. Olive has Giardia, which is it's a bacterial infection in the intestines that makes you have diarrhea.
And Olive has this?
Olive has this, yeah. She came to us with it.
Okay.
She had diarrhea, and
oh, poor baby.
Ducky came to us with that too. So she has Giardia, so we have her on an antibiotic, but we had to wait until Monday, which is today. We just got it today. Sonny's crawling around. He's putting everything in his mouth. He's at the...
Oh, I see where they're getting this now, Ethan. Like, if you're going to try to accuse people of being of just completely making everything up, like, maybe edit selectively a little bit better. Because now, I mean, it sounds like anyone who listens to that could have said, well, wait a second, that's kind of fucked up.
That age, he has Giardia. Again, any reasonable person or parent understands that having a 10-month-old that is just learning to crawl, is crawling around everywhere, putting everything in his mouth. I mean, these kids will literally just lick the floor, put anything in the world in their mouth, and that's completely normal. That's what...
Yeah, I mean, true. Absolutely true. But you can see where somebody would have gotten the idea that maybe some dog diarrhea was involved in...
Having a toddler is like. Olive is a black Labrador. She sheds a lot. She's inside. She's outside. She's very clean. But the point I'm making, again, which all reasonable people understand, is that Giardia...
Oh, okay. It looked like she and he were chatting. It felt like... it felt like there was a dialogue there. Okay. So she watched somebody else say something.
Maybe spread just from a surface. So if her bum ends up on the floor, or she sheds some hair, or she sat on a toy, it could be a number of different things.
Well, yeah, which is why you've got to be picking that shit up and constantly washing it if you know there's that kind of a parasite, let me say. I mean, and I don't have kids, but I have nieces. And I know that's an extremely complicated and difficult thing to do, but they've got, like, again, a nanny and a housekeeper. You'd think that between those two members of, like, household staff, one of whom is suing him, that you would be on top of that, because, yeah, I mean, that stuff would have to be, like, picked up and disinfected regularly under those circumstances, because it can quite be dangerous for little kids.
Sonny's crawling around putting everything in his mouth. It seems like a pretty reasonable suspect. If he's having diarrhea, we're like, oh man, maybe he got Giardia from Olive, which is actually commonplace to happen. And despite what Denham says, it is not certain death. It's actually completely...
No, she didn't say it's certain death. It was, first of all, it was somebody in her chat who said that it can be life-threatening. And it can be. Diarrhea is a potentially life-threatening condition.
Normal to happen, and it's very easy to treat. Now, spoiler alert, it actually turns out when we got all of the poop tests back that...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they did fuck up. It sounds like probably CPS is an overreaction there. But, I mean, it also sounds like by describing it the way that he did, he painted a picture that might have led somebody else to say, wait a second, this is not necessarily a very healthy environment for little kids.
He never had Giardia even, which I announced on the show, which they conveniently forget. So the only person that ever even had Giardia was Olive. So Sonny was having diarrhea, essentially. And that
which is what Giardia gives you.
Was and that's why they called CPS. Because my 10-month-old baby, who's just starting to eat solid food, had diarrhea.
I mean, and what he just described is the obvious way that Giardia would be transmitted to him.
That's why these people think it's justified to send an agent of one of the most overworked, underfunded, underappreciated community service work
It's funny that you just said underappreciated because he was just slagging the guy off. Despite the fact that, I mean, it sounds like he was extremely accommodating.
In the entire fucking world to come and waste their time because my son had a diarrhea. When in the city of Los Angeles, there are kids and families that absolutely need help from people like this, and this guy's wasting his fucking time coming to my house and doing it.
Well, I mean, I suppose you'd have to ask him if he feels it's a waste of his time.
Investigation on my kids because my 10-month-old baby had diarrhea.
In the context where you said that there was Giardia in the house, and you just said that there's toys lying around that the dog could have sat on, thus transmitting Giardia to the fucking toys. Like, you just sort of described a classic way that it's transmitted.
By the way, Bad Empanada was recently banned for 7 days for playing a video game in which you roleplay as Hamas on October 7th, and he went to a military compound in that game and said he was, quote, looking for secretaries to kill. He was looking for Ela, who was a secretary in the IDF.
Well, I mean, I know that part of the history here is that Bad Empanada actually pointed out, I don't know on what basis he said this, but he said that no, she wasn't just a fucking secretary.
To murder her in a game where you play Hamas. This is the type of person that is being elevated.
Wait, I mean, in an armed conflict, you do kind of shoot members of the military. That's kind of how that works.
I'd like to pay tribute to Ethan Klein and the new Twitch TOS that declares Zionism. Zion is the slur. I'd like to pay tribute to him by playing the first in Al-Aqsa video game where you kill Zionist soldiers as a Palestinian resistance fighter.
It's not about October 7th? Okay. I'm quite curious about this game, actually.
Anyways, are these Israelis? They're just standing there? I mean, is the Israeli army a bunch of Ethan Kleins? Like, they're all on a
why can't, did Ethan Klein fucking blur the whole thing so you can't see what's going on?
Ozempic binge? They don't understand what's going on around them? They haven't noticed me? How do I win? What's my objective? I don't actually know.
Oh, he blurred it because he doesn't want to get taken down, I guess.
Where do they keep the secretaries? In here? I'm hunting for secretaries right now. Secretary got, on behalf of Ethan Klein, I give this game my seal of approval.
Here's Bad Empanada once again, who posted a story saying, I'm the one who called CPS on Ethan Klein. I want CPS to take his kids away because they are seriously in danger. This is, once again, Bad Empanada, who's being elevated by Hassan, Matt Lieb, Denims, and tons of creators, leftist creators, all over the internet.
Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, please welcome Bad Empanada.
Bad Empanada's been going crazy at Ethan on the second channel. Well, yeah, because Ethan Klein is too afraid to talk to Bad Empanada or talk about Bad Empanada or watch any of his videos. So fucking milk that guy, dude. Hell yeah, Bad Empanada, go in.
Can we just...
Okay. I think we've talked enough about diarrhea for today. So, let's see. Rather than talking about it, we've got Caleb Maupin. We've got a Caleb Maupin video. We don't need to talk about diarrhea. We can watch some diarrhea. Liberalism versus government of action. Fursan al-Aqsa. Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up. It's only $10 on Steam. Oh, neat. Liberalism versus government of action.
Why a government of action and the end of liberalism? Now, for a long time, folks, the slogan that we have used for the Center for Political Innovation is we need a government of action to fight for working families. And that has been the slogan that we've used for quite some time. And in the past...
No, this is Caleb Maupin.
I've had people who say, well, that just sounds like random words. I can assure you these are...
No, it doesn't sound like random words. It just sounds bland as hell. Like... And I love how he's been using that for, I think, a decade now. And he's just now gotten around to answering the question what the hell it even means.
Are not random words. First of all, why do I say a government of action to fight for working families?
Well, because that's like the blandest shit ever, and you're a very bland little guy.
That's because in the 1990s, the labor unions did polls. And they discovered that if you wanted to build up...
Once again, it's the SEIU. Like, he did a whole thing. We watched it a long time ago on here, where it was explained the reason he wears suits is because an SEIU full-timer told him that's what real revolutionaries wear.
Public support for things like higher wages and healthcare benefits and jobs, etc. One of the ways to do that was to refer to those who would benefit not as working people or the working class, but as working families.
Yeah, I mean, so, okay, chat, help me out here. The 1990s, was that recent? Would you necessarily rely for your entire fucking shit-ass brand on some polling that somebody did in the fucking 1990s? I feel like you might want to look and see, because it does. I mean, one of the things about it is it seems dated as hell. It sounds like something Chuck Schumer would say.
Because family gives people a feeling of community. And if you think of a working family, you think of parents that are going out and working hard to pay their bills, you think of community coming together. Americans respond far more positively to talk of working families.
According to one poll from the 1990s by people affiliated with the Democratic Party.
Than they do of talk of workers or the working class. In America, everyone thinks they're in the middle class. No one thinks that they're part of the quote-unquote working class. But when you say...
wait, actually, funny thing is they didn't stop doing polls in the 1990s. They've been doing polls ever since, it turns out. And actually, one of the things that's been changing is exactly what he's talking about. Like, especially younger people. Much more likely to see themselves as part of the
people feel good about
class.
that. So basic marketing research by the labor union said, let's talk about working families. Here in New York State, they have the Working Families Party, which is another form of the Democratic Party that
yeah, I know. Why the hell have you decided? So you've decided to just sort of ride their coattails
as a ballot line. They have, the Working Families Conference that is sponsored by the labor unions. Well, the communist groups at the time, they all denounced that because they said the term working families was somehow anti-LGBT.
I really doubt that was what they were arguing in the 1990s. Because it was a while, actually. I mean, I remember the 1990s quite well, actually, and it was a while before LGBT became actually a thing. I don't remember that being there for all of the 1990s.
And that right there shows you how dumb, and absurd communist groups can be, because...
Mention the 90s, but no Chicago Bulls analogy. Nice callback there, yes. The 1990 Chicago Bulls.
Everybody can tell that working families is a far more marketable and...
what do you mean everyone can tell? If everyone can tell, Caleb, then why do you feel the need to justify this? In fact, if everybody can tell, then why is it that there aren't why is it you're the only one doing this?
Persuasive term than just working.
And on top of that, why can't you get your autofocus to focus on you? Are you an autofocus vampire? Or do you deliberately have it focus on your books and not your face, so that you're just this weird Nazgul blur?
Class, and so when I was thinking of what slogan would I like for the movement I'm trying to build with the Center for Political Innovation, I said we're going to talk about working families. But why did I call for a government of action?
As opposed to a government that doesn't do stuff.
Why that? What does that even mean, a government of action? Well,
I mean, good question. I've been wondering for a long time what the fuck you mean by it. Because it isn't a phrase that actually... I mean, working families is a phrase that is used by, like, people who mostly just sort of fleece the working class. But nobody talks about a fucking government of action. When I first heard that, I actually decided to try to look for where he got that. Because he gets there's very little that Caleb Maupin does that is his own thing. He pretty much takes it all from someplace. Like, I mean, I remember for a while he was talking about an anti-monopoly coalition. And I looked that up, and that was a failed CPUSA strategy from the 1970s.
Well, that's what we're going to get into tonight, because government of action is a repudiation of liberalism.
Really? Like, okay. And why has it taken this long for you to define these things, Caleb?
Liberals, in the sense of the Democrats and Republicans. Liberalism, the ideology that defines and drives the so-called West. And that is what we're going to talk about tonight.
I mean, not just the so-called West. I mean, yes, the so-called West is in there, too.
Why we are for a government of action and the end of...
Oh, God, he's got a PowerPoint.
Liberalism. So let's first get into, what is liberalism? Liberalism is a political and philosophical worldview that celebrates individualism above all else. Liberalism is...
Okay. I think that is a really kind of... it's not a terrible definition, but I feel like it leaves some important bits out.
Collectivism. Liberalism is all about the individual. Individual rights. It is... Government has no right to tell you what to do. You have no obligation to anybody else. Economic liberalism is the free market and capitalism. Social liberalism is your ability to just do whatever you feel like doing, not having any community obligation. The liberal government system is the democratic republic, and the liberal economic system is capitalism, or the free market. The democratic republic...
I mean... That's interesting that he would put it that way, because, I mean, I don't think you would really describe the German Democratic Republic, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea as liberal systems of government exactly. I mean, they certainly were not entirely free of liberalism, because it was state capitalism. But...
Republic is a government of elected individuals, and those elected individuals, they basically don't have the ability to interfere with your life. You have freedom of religion, which is a good thing, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of, all these things are good things. I'm totally all for freedom. And capitalism, or the free market,
for freedom. Wow.
Market is the idea that the economy takes care of itself, that the state shouldn't intervene in the...
But that's nonsense. That's not how any of that works. I mean, the state intervenes heavily in capitalism because capitalism could not work without the state intervening. Like, the commons literally could not have been enclosed without the state.
The economy... etc. And this is the liberal worldview. Conservatives and Republicans in America emphasize market and economic liberalism. They believe in the free market. Democrats and the so-called liberals in American politics, they emphasize the social part of this. Your right to use drugs.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing the Democrats are really big into, it's your right to use drugs.
Your right to freedom of speech, your right to just do whatever you want to do and live according to your own rules or whatever. Liberalism is the celebration of the individual above all else, and it is the ideology.
I don't know that I would. I mean, there are forms of liberalism that are certainly that, but social democracy is a form of liberalism as well, and there's a fair, and you wouldn't really say that that is like rugged individualism there.
Upon which the so-called West, the collective West, the NATO countries, the Atlanticist countries, the colonial countries, the colonizers, the colonial powers were established. And we're going to talk about it. Liberalism, it's based on a logical fallacy. It views freedom as
Badger.
an eternal value disconnected from any conditions or state of development. Right? And that's the first problem with liberalism. It makes it sound like everyone was just evil until like the 1400s in Europe, and then John Locke came along and said, everyone should have the right to life, liberty, and property. And people were like, well, they should.
Hello, Phoenix.
It doesn't take into account that the reason nobody talked about freedom of speech or freedom of religion or freedom of the press or life, liberty, and property until like the 1400s in Europe was because there had not yet been the level of economic development to facilitate those rights. People were not evil in ancient Greece and Rome, and that's why.
I feel like actually there were some people talking about some of those things in different forms, given the different, economic and historical and political context. Going well back before the Middle Ages.
Why they didn't have freedom. People were not evil in medieval times. That's why they didn't have freedom.
Who says that that's what was going on, that everyone was just evil? I mean, I've never heard anyone make that version of the argument.
People were not evil in the Dark Ages. There had never been a level of economic development that could allow for and facilitate the level of freedom that emerged in Western societies in the 1400s, 1500s, etc. And that's a really, really important thing to understand, because the United States talks about freedom.
Okay, so people were not evil. Like, I'm glad we've disabused people of this notion that I'm sure somebody must have held.
In the complete abstract. America is a good country because we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of religion, etc. And all these other countries that don't have it, well, they're just bad, and because they don't have it. And so we just need to show them the way to be good. It doesn't take into account that different countries are in different circumstances, that freedom in any society is rooted in the level of development and the conditions of that society.
Oh, this is where he's going with this.
And that the less developed a society is, the more authoritarian it's going to be. The more developed, the more stable.
The less developed, the more authoritarian. Yeah, I don't actually see that that's necessarily the case.
Then the more you're going to have freedom. And freedom is a good thing, but it is not, it doesn't...
Actually, if anything, the U.S. is a very highly developed society, and for basically my entire life, it's been getting more authoritarian.
It doesn't exist in the abstract. And that is one of the biggest flaws in liberalism. Liberalism views freedom as an eternal value. The people living in ancient Egypt should have had the exact same level of freedom that you and I have.
Well, I mean, I imagine if you go back, there were probably people in... I mean, there were... The first recorded labor strike on the historical record was in ancient Egypt. It seems like actually there were some people who were advocating for greater freedom.
And the fact that they didn't, that meant the Pharaoh was evil and all of that. Well, that's fallacious. Freedom is rooted in development, right? The economic...
I mean, no. This is a weird version of materialism here. I mean, yeah, what freedom is available in a particular situation is going to depend on what possibilities exist, socially and just, materially in the social context a person is living in. That's true. I mean, and of course, what kind of system of government you end up with is going to be largely... heavily influenced by what kind of system of production you have. Oh, that's good news. But, it's not... he's, trying to create this this scale where it's, freedom is automatically tied to the amount of development there is, and I mean, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
Base of society. We've gone from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery to feudalism, and with the dawn of capitalism, we started to see the beginning of civil liberties. And the feudal system had one economic form, the ancient slave system.
This is what gets me about his prepared remarks is that they are always somehow less coherent and harder to follow than when he's just going off the cuff. Somehow it is actually when he decides to actually do something that he prepares, it is more random than when he's actually
their
being
economic
random.
form. The majority of human civilization was hunter-gatherer civilization, where people lived in tribes, and each of those forms has had a different political model. And as we get more development, the individual has more room to be themselves and think as they want, say what they want, etc.
Actually, when you look at accounts of hunter-gatherer societies and early communism and stuff like that, often those societies offered a significant degree of freedom, and in fact more than later forms of social organization did.
It's not an eternal value, it's rooted in development. The second flaw in liberalism is that liberalism is always propped up by illiberalism.
Illiberalism, it's worth noting, is a term that has been popularized by Orbán Viktor, the neo-Nazi in Hungary, and it's a term he uses to avoid saying fascism.
There is no more hypocritical ideology than liberalism, right? And, our great American history is a great example of that, right? At the time that our country was being established, our leaders couldn't talk. They were espousing the liberal ideology like you wouldn't believe. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, our God-given rights and freedom. And they had slaves. How does that work?
Well, I don't know. You're the one who just wanted to be the patriotic socialist. Why didn't you explain how sucking up to that makes sense?
There's always something like that going on. During the Cold War, the argument of the United States was that we have freedom. We're the great societies that have freedom, and those communists, they want to take your freedom away. And we're fighting for your freedom while they backed all kinds of brutal authoritarian dictators.
Yeah, this is such a weird... he's talking about freedom. What's wild about this is that if you want to talk about, freedom in the context of economic development and stuff like that, and it's an important thing to talk about, but, he does not define what the hell he even means by freedom. Because there's lots of different kinds of freedom, and it applies in different ways. For example, think about, if the U.S. got a functioning public health care system tomorrow, how many people would feel free to just leave their fucking jobs? How many people would tell their bosses to get fucked? Because suddenly, they would have, that level of freedom would be offered to them. What kind of, when we talk about freedom, it's there are different kinds of, different kinds of freedom. You can't just talk about freedom he says, the problem with liberalism is it treats freedom as an eternal value, but he does not define what the fuck freedom even is. So he is literally treating freedom as an eternal abstract value with no historical context, because if you wanted to actually do anything else, you would have to talk about what freedom it is. The freedom from what? Freedom to do what? What does it mean?
Like Park Chung-hee in South Korea, like Pinochet in Chile, the dictatorship in Indonesia. Like Marcos in the Philippines. There were all kinds of brutal dictators who were on our side, at the same time that our whole argument for why we were better than the communists is we have freedom.
Yeah, it's called bullshit. Yes, it's true. The U.S. is full of shit. This is why you'll find a lot of real communists aren't really big into being patriotic about the U.S.
And it is always the case. Liberalism could not exist without illiberalism. There's always authoritarianism and repression and people being violated of their rights. At the same time, you have a liberal society saying, look at us, we're so great because we have our rights. And even some of the people that we can really admire. I admire, for example, Oliver Cromwell.
Really? The Butcher of Ireland. That's an interesting choice.
Because Oliver Cromwell broke apart feudalism in Britain, cut off the head of the King of England.
You're not going to mention Ireland.
And was fighting for, freedom of religion.
He literally is the reason that the north of Ireland is colonized.
And the right of people to read the Bible for themselves. But at the same time, you can't pretend that Oliver Cromwell, yes, he may have been a champion of the rights of English people, and their freedom to some degree or other. But at the same time, he wasn't, for the Irish people. And he.
Oh, okay, good. I have to say, that is not a given, I've found. It's like, even English people will talk about Cromwell as if the only thing he ever did was in England. And I mean...
he committed genocide against the Irish people for being Catholic. You can think about Napoleon, right?
Well, I mean, not specifically for being Catholic, so much as for having their own land and wanting to stay on it. I mean, Cromwell was really, in many ways, the prototype for Zionism.
Napoleon.
I mean, he was the prototype in a lot of ways just for settler colonialism generally.
When he was marching the ideals of the French Revolution across Europe, right? He said he was the revolution in boots. He was marching the French Revolution across Europe.
Fun thing about, I was thinking about Napoleon. It's interesting he brings it up because, the thing about Napoleon is when you look at his class background and you look at, like, the class that was his base for support, you could call him a Burger King.
And the ideals of the French Revolution,
Burger with an H.
Liberty, equality, fraternity, the new order, meritocracy. But then what was he doing in Haiti? And where he was a colonizer and a brutal oppressor.
Wait.
Of the Haitian people. And
is he talking about Napoleon here? Wait, did I miss something? Chat. I thought he was talking about Napoleon. But by the time Napoleon comes into it, Haiti was already independent.
And the islands that were the colonies of France, where they had slavery of African people, and they brutally exterminated the indigenous people. And there's just example after example of this. Liberalism is always propped up by illiberalism.
Yeah, I mean, and here you're bringing liberalism right into your fucking slogan with this working families bullshit.
And it's not just in the past, it's currently. For example, great example, Zelensky. We are told that, the reason we must support you.
I want there to be an academic scholarly biography of Napoleon called Burger King.
Ukraine is a democracy, and, Russia, which is supposed to be not a democracy. And
I mean, it isn't.
Authoritarian regime is attacking this democracy. Well,
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, and this is one of the things, I got into it with some people on Facebook in the past week over this. Okay, I think there are enough people in chat who are old enough to remember the anti-war movement against the invasion of Iraq, where, I mean, one of the things that the U.S. government was saying, when they weren't lying about weapons of mass destruction, they were saying, Saddam Hussein is a brutal tyrant, he's committed massive atrocities against his own people and all sorts of things. They left out the bit where the U.S. supported him in doing that. And the answer of the anti-war movement was, yeah, but that does not justify what the U.S. is doing is worse than that, actually. That does not justify the U.S. invading their country, destroying it, and murdering a huge number of people. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, we're supposed to just retcon 8 years of reporting, before the invasion. Mainstream news outlets in the U.S. and in the West generally reported on the degree to which neo-Nazis had massive influence, massive street power, were being given, to some extent deputized into law enforcement, and being given modern military-grade weapons, to to use against other Ukrainians, which they eagerly did. And all of this was amply reported in Western media outlets, the same Western media outlets that now pretend that that's Russian propaganda. And when you even bring this stuff up, when you bring up the degree to which fascism plays a role in, like, post-2014 Ukrainian government, and let's note, the pre-2014 Ukrainian government wasn't great either. I mean, it was the poorest country in Europe before, it still is. That's not because the government was wonderful to its people, it's because everything is lining the pockets of a handful of oligarchs. And, like, Western investors to a great extent as well, and Russian investors. But the idea that you can, on the one hand, acknowledge all this shit about the way that Ukraine functions and the degree to which fascism has taken hold there, with the connivance and support of the government, and still say, yeah, but that does not justify the invasion, because it's just complete bullshit. When, Putin says that he wants to denazify Ukraine, obviously that's a lie. He doesn't have a problem with Nazis unless they happen to be Ukrainian. He surrounds himself with Nazis himself. Second of all, it was obvious from the start that the invasion was going to make the entire situation worse with the Nazis. And it has. Like, that argument is obvious and it's easy to make, and it's the exact same sort of argument nobody had any trouble with in the anti-war movement in, 2002, 2003, against the invasion of Iraq, because it's just basic fucking common sense. But now, if you even, just bring up those facts and say, yeah, that doesn't justify anything that Russia's doing, but these are facts, and it is a problem, and it's screwing, and it's created an intolerable situation for a lot of Ukrainian workers, and also explains why they have a massive recruiting problem despite being literally invaded, which is usually a situation where you don't have a recruiting problem because everybody wants to join in, unless there's something wrong with the regime that makes people not want to die for it. Yeah, and it's just fucked up, actually.
Folks, I was in Russia just last March, just a year ago. I was in Russia to observe their election, which they had in line with their constitution. They haven't had an election in Ukraine. But
yeah, and the Russian election was dodgy as fuck, and it's true. He's not wrong that currently the Ukrainian government does not have an electoral mandate. They don't, and what I've seen is liberals trying to justify this. They'll be like, oh, but he's not a dictator because, you see, he invoked a constitutional state of exception. And it's like, that's literally what all dictators do, though. Like, he could also call the state of exception off in order to have the election. And if you actually look at the poll, they'll point out one poll that says he had a 57% approval rating. But the thing is, the poll does not, they don't ask approval in Ukrainian, they ask trust. And there were two polls on his trust rating. One did not offer, don't know, won't answer, what are you, a fucking cop, as an explicit option. That's the one that got 57%. The other poll that was conducted at roughly the same time did offer, don't know, decline to answer, are you a fucking cop, as an explicit option. And that one got 45% for Zelensky. Meanwhile, there were also polls on, would you vote for him if there were an election? And he would not have won an election he would not have won an election if he had faced one. In fact, a lot of people overwhelmingly were saying he should not actually stand for re-election when that happens. And I should add, because I try to actually provide all the information that I have that's relevant, that, there are also polls on whether people, approve of waiting on the elections until the invasion is over, or, there's a ceasefire or something. And most people in those polls, I don't know whether do not know, refuse to answer was an option in that one, But most people in those polls did say, yeah, they understand. They're fine with waiting under the circumstances. But on the whole, Zelensky does not rate very well. He would not win the election. In fact, he's just the front runner in if there were an election was Poroshenko, who also sucks shit. He's fascist. He's fascist fuck. He's Zelensky's predecessor, in fact. And Zelensky just sanctioned him for some reason or other. Probably because he was getting too popular, because, I mean, Zelensky has, like, banned a whole lot of the political opposition. But none of that, I mean, and let me just say again, because apparently people have trouble understanding this in the US in 2025, none of that means Russia should have invaded. But time for us to wrap up. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. It's always lovely to see you. And I will be back at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time this coming Friday. Have a good evening. And